call this meeting to order. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do a roll call. Paul Breuer. Here. Timothy Neville. Here. Brad Arrow. Here. Mark Young. Here. David Erdman. All right. At this time, there is only one matter pending before the Planning Commission at this time, so we're going to welcome public comment. We would ask that you keep it to around 3 minutes, just to make sure there's enough time for everyone. We'll provide a little leeway, we're not going to be draconian about that, but please keep it to the subject matter, which is the application that's been filed before the Planning Commission. And I can happily provide you with an overview of what the application is, although I'm thinking people know. So there is an application for a data center under our existing ordinance. The application was received by our municipality prior to the effective date of the pending ordinance that we have recently enacted, but within the time frame of it. And it is to provide for the data center at the Schaefer property, which has been the subject of the last few meetings. There are plans available. There is also information available. If you haven't seen it already, it can be obtained from the municipality. I don't know that we have multiple copies of those plans up here, but they can certainly be obtained. Additionally, we have a court reporter here tonight, so I would ask that anyone speaking, please provide your name and your residence before you make a statement. Please don't talk out of turn so that the court reporter can record what you're saying. And because this is a court reporter, we would ask that you not gesticulate or nod or do things like that. If you have something you want to say, use words to say it. That way it'll be recorded for our minutes. Okay. Now, with that being said, does any member of the public have any comment on the application before we proceed with the application? Sir.
Ron Zimmer, 88 Hoffmanville School Road. We met here on 5/11. We were advised by our solicitor, the supervisors were advised by our solicitor that if we did nothing on that evening, we would come in under the ordinance that we have now, that the data center has now filed under. Our supervisors were under the impression that if we passed an ordinance that night, that would be effective. Nothing was said about a 30-day hold. And I'd like to know why we're now sitting here with an application under the old industrial zoning ordinance.
Sure. Two parts to that, sir. To respond to your comment, number one is that there's a requirement under the municipality's planning code to provide for a period of enactment and an effective date for appeal purposes. So I understand your perspective on that, but also at the same time, having passed the ordinance that we did, we can't look to that as being relevant concerns when considering the conditional use provisions of our existing ordinance to use that as a foundation. So it's not that it has no effect whatsoever. It does have some security effect.
So I'll respond to your comment.
Sure.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know law, but from the reading I have done in June or in 2025, there was a law that said those ordinances could be acted immediately. I won't argue that because I'm not sure, but I would also say you advised our supervisors and said nothing about that 30-day hold. We left that meeting with a false impression, and I don't like that.
Okay, so thank you.
We have a presentation.
Actually, please stand and provide your name and address. I'm sorry I have to make it easy.
Hi, good evening. My name is Deborah Schultz. I'm an attorney representing Outrigger Industrial Acquisition LLC. It's the law firm of Outrigger on public record. Attorney Brendo, if you wouldn't mind, we actually have a presentation we thought we would make. And the first thing I was going to say in that presentation was that even though we submitted the application as a, use not otherwise provided for, and by the way, we did that just as a protective appeal, because we weren't sure whether the ordinance that was enacted was ultimately gonna be challenged, and that might be tied up in court. So we did it as a protective appeal. However, my client is fully committed to comply with all of the terms under the new ordinance, and as we go through the conditional use process before the hearing, there's a number of requirements. I was gonna, you're getting me a little out of order, but I'm not going to just say it now up front, if you don't mind.
Sure.
There's a number of requirements under your new ordinance that you're gonna comply with. First of all, I wanna reassure everybody that the plan that is here before that was submitted is the same exact plan that everybody has seen to date. The building size is the same. This will be the maximum building size. It could get smaller, but it's never gonna get larger. The setbacks are the same. We have committed to, under the ordinance, the closest, setback across Interstate 80 to the closest residential is a little over 700 feet. There's a number of requirements under the new ordinance, such as lighting that will be demonstrated compliance with. There's a very comprehensive environmental impact assessment requirement that has a number of requirements under that, including hydrology study, water impact, air quality, view shed, and we're agreeable to doing that. In fact, that's in the works and will be presented as part of the conditional use hearing. In addition, there's a land reclamation plan, decommissioning plan, decommissioning financial security, which the applicant is fully agreeable to complying with and would accept these as conditions of approval should the board grant the application. In addition, noise impact, I know that was a big issue with the board and with the township and with the neighbors. That's gonna be part of the study that's required under the EIA assessment. That's in the works as well, and will be fully compliant with that portion of your ordinance. In addition, there's EMF standards, there's structural standards, a buffer zone, and a whole host of other things, all of which you're agreeable to comply with. So I don't want anyone to think this is a bait and switch. That certainly is not our intention. Again, and we're happy if you want us to go through, we're gonna kind of go through the plan and have Albert speak a little bit about it. I don't want to take that order, if you were gonna jump right into public comment, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I appreciate that, and I would love for you to provide that overview, and then have the public comment on it, but the way we have it structured, the way it's been structured for every public meeting is the public gets to comment first and then the application, just so their thoughts can be heard prior to you presenting.
Okay.
So, I think that that's probably what we're going to have to stick with right now, but I do appreciate the overview of those.
Okay, certainly, thank you.
Sir?
How you doing? Robert Jones, 108 Oldfield Drive. I actually had a question for you now that you brought up the ordinances and things that you kind of topsy brought up. There's something I wanted to ask. The first one, what is the parent company? Not the LLC that you were filing for, but what's the actual parent company that's going to utilize the data center?
So, just to be clear, you could ask questions arguably to me, although technically speaking, I would have to respond. You could ask questions to the planning commission, although they don't have to respond. But if you're going to ask questions of other people here, I would say, don't make it in the form of a question, because they don't have to respond either. But what I would say is, I think what I understand from you, sir, is you want to know who that
Yeah.
ultimate client is.
Yes.
And you think that should be a question that we ask here.
Correct.
Is that correct? Correct.
And she is free to answer if she wants to, or if you want to answer. Doesn't matter who answers.
Well, we can't answer at all. I don't have that information, but I'm telling you the word. She can answer if she wants to, but she doesn't have to.
Why is it such a secret?
It's not a matter of being a secret, sir, and again, if we're going to comment, let's make sure we say our names, go in turn order. Just to be very clear about it, there's a certain form of procedure. If you're going to make public comment, you can make comment. The idea behind public comment is it's less questions and more commentary. So I've reviewed this, here are my concerns, we think we should ask those types of questions, that type of stuff for the planning commission to consider. Okay?
Then I'll use my 3 minutes to make more comments then.
Absolutely. sir.
So, I'm a resident here, and I actually have a clear view of my backyard to where potentially it will be, so it's obviously going to impact potentially my property, my taxes, everything, so forth. My well-being as well. So I do have concern, but I'm not here today to say yes or no, or be for or against. I'm here simply to get information, as you can kind of imagine. So I do have questions, so I'm hoping that there will be an opportunity to ask some clarifying questions, because I think we all have a lot of questions. So I want the opportunity for the public to be able to ask these types of specific questions, because that's going to help us determine, is this something that's gonna be positive for our community or negative for our community overall? With that said, again, I'm not here for yes or no, I'm here more to get information. There's obviously, I've been reading a lot on it, I'm sure you guys have as well, there's some positives, some negatives, things that we wanna know. But there's some things that we really wanna know as far as the overall public good. So such things as, we already talked about, noise ordinance. We also wanna know if they violate the noise ordinance, who's going to be responsible for implications or penalties like that, and are they gonna be enforced? We also wanna know about taxes, right? Is there any tax incentives that they are going to get? That what is also the revenue that we are going to get from Mifflin Township. So obviously with a big, huge building with employees, there's gonna be some kind of revenue stream. We're gonna get taxes, both Central Columbia School Board's gonna get taxes from it, Mifflin Township's gonna get taxes from it, as well as the county. So I would like to know what potentially, or what is an estimated taxes that we should be receiving, you guys will be receiving for that, and is that going to be used maybe to incentivize other public, everyone else is paying taxes, maybe to lower possible property taxes. That has happened in other townships, where instead of paying a 1.25, you get reduced to maybe a 0.8, something like that, because if you're gonna get $3 million in taxes on an annual basis, the kickback is gonna go back to the residents and allow the residents to say, okay, we'll allow this, but that's going to be a discount on our property taxes that we're paying for on a regular basis. So there's things like that that we really wanna know and I really wanna understand, and I have read through the laws, current laws, as well as what's currently through the legislature and what potentially, and I also want to know more about that. Because there are several different state bills out there now that have already passed through the state senate, are actually in the House right now to be passed. 3 of the 4 of them are most likely going to be passed because they have bipartisan agreement. But I would really want to kind of get a better understanding, what's that, does that mean, is this grandfathered where we don't have to abide by a 180-day rule? We don't have to abide by different ordinances that are going to happen, or different incentives that, both the state reps as well as the governor is trying to implement and make it more difficult for these data centers to be built. So that's information that I think I would like to know more. So at the end of the day, again, I'm not here to attack anybody. I'm not here to say yes or no, I'm here to get information. I think the vast majority of us are also trying to get just more information. I wasn't here last time, I apologize, but I heard there was not a lot of information last meeting. And I heard it was just a lot of more questions came out of it than actually answers. So I'm hoping that this will be a meeting where we can get more answers to questions. Thank you.
Kind of ferocious. The only question I have right now is, I thought we were informed there was not going to be any wells drilled, yet that on this map there is proposed well. From everything I remember and reading, that was going to go to public water, but why now a proposed well? Because that's going to affect a lot of people. That's town water. And that's not good, right, it's a very major concern for a lot of people. So why now, when we were informed, bear with me. So if that's on there now, what else has changed that we're not aware of?
Oh, in the back there?
Pam Rude, Mary Street, Mifflinville. Going with what the lady just spoke about. They said there was going to be no wells drilled on site. On the planogram, it shows a well being drilled, has it marked, well. Now, I just had talked to my sister-in-law, her niece lives in New Jersey. Their prices on their electric bill has gone from $150 to over $300 a month. People are losing their homes because they can't afford air conditioning, they can't afford heat, and they cannot afford the $800 a month rent. Is that going to happen to you? There's a lot of senior citizens and people that live in this town that love this town. It's a community where everybody knows everybody. They help each other. I'm sorry. Have a good night.
One,
Can you state your name?
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Alex Wehrman, and I live on 1014 Race Street here in town. And, so, I echo the question of who is it for, Amazon or whoever, I'd like to know that. I also remember the first time we met about it, somebody brought up how they're concerned about a trout pond or some kind of fish stream. And Steve said, I too love fishing, we're not gonna do a well. And then I got a ton of paperwork very kindly from Ricky that was a bunch of emails, and I saw on there something about a well. And I brought all the papers to the meeting, and I asked about the well that I saw. And I was, I don't know, kind of treated like, you silly person, we already said we're not gonna do a well. So over and over again, that's come up, and then I look at that and I see the well right there. So that is my first concern. My second concern is I'm wondering what kind of generators are going to be used. Because I saw in the news, and I printed it out if anyone wants to see it, usually, we were told that backup emergency generators, the diesel generators, I think diesel, for the data center would only run for like 30 minutes a week or something to test them, or like a few minutes a month or something to test them. And so the noise and pollution wouldn't be that big of a concern. But I read in the news that, I think it was July 2nd, there was some kind of Department of Energy thing with the heat wave that just happened. They said that all of the data centers in this area that are, like, including where we are required to use their diesel generators round the clock for a certain amount of, for several days to take the load off of the electric grid. So I just wanted to say that the people, I live near West Street, and a lot of people who live there, there are many older people, a lot of little kids that seem pretty close to those diesel generators that can like generate a lot of what they call it, like fine particulate matter that like soot in the air. And I'm concerned about them being required to run the diesel generators more than we had originally thought. And my last point is that I do not see where the fuel tank or fuel line for the diesel generators is. And if that is missing from the plans, you should reject them, because thinking about it from a safety point of view, if that's left off, then what else has been left off? And if that's left off, then the plan should be incomplete, so we can just reject them and move on with everything. I was also wondering about whether or not the new easement for the power lines have been granted from whoever does that, and if we can really even evaluate the plans if the easement hasn't been evaluated from whoever does that. So those are my main concerns.
Anyone else? Again,
I'll take a second turn.
What was your name again?
Robert Jones, 108 Oldfield Drive. So while we're on statements, I want to also clarify what I spoke about earlier about some of the questions that hopefully will be able to get addressed. The community, I know the community, talking to others in the community, that these are questions that I've been hearing as well as the easement. I also am very interested in where the power lines are going to be, where they currently are, where they're going to be placed. With the power lines, as well as you brought up a very good point that wasn't even probably thought of. What are some things that we're not being considered that should be on the plan that is not currently? All these things need to be considered, because without a full application, we don't know every single possible issue that might arise. But other things such as the traffic, even the traffic in town, how is that going to be affected? Because right now, there's times even in town by Love's that there's a pretty good traffic jam at 5 o'clock. With trucks coming in and out, especially during construction periods, how is that going to be managed? How is that going to be brought up? Is that even been brought up, or is that even considered at this point? Other things considered as well is, to your point, is environmental issues, right? A lot of times, especially there's an easterly wind that comes our way, especially up the hill. Brad, you can contest because you're in a neighborhood. We get sometimes easterly wind. I would like to know, is there going to be any potential issue with contaminants, smells, anything like that that could potentially be a harmful impact. If there's like considerations, I'd also like to know, like, how are those gonna be, mitigated with that? And then finally, the last thing, you know, I think was brought up, that I didn't mention earlier was definitely, as much as I can see kind of the detail right here, what's still kind of left off, and I know that the lawyer brought up mentioning that's never gonna get larger, but does that also mean that they're never going to purchase other parcels adjacent to them and eventually expand and stuff like that as well? I'm kind of curious about that as well.
So the good news, sir, one thing I can answer for
Yeah.
you is that even though our ordinance was not effective at that time, okay, it will be for any
Okay.
future applications, and we only have to accept this on the terms of this application.
Okay.
So in terms of any future expansion or other data center sites, we've locked that.
Will that ordinance also include if they potentially sell to another company, that company also has to abide by that ordinance as well, I assume?
It's not dependent on who owns it.
Okay,
It's
good.
dependent on when they come in time.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to speak. I'm Meg Younger, I'm a life support therapist, I live here on 610 Ray Street. I just wanted to speak because I love this area, I've lived here my whole life. And, from what I understand about what's happening with the data center, I just want to understand, where the water will be coming from for the data center. I think that's something we should all consider. Looking at all of you guys, I can assume that maybe you guys have grandchildren that live here, that you want to have a good quality of life, in this area. Considering where the water will come from for a data center and everything else, I just wanted to throw it out there that maybe that should be something that should be considered.
I saw you over there, I'm waiting. Thank you for your patience.
I know you guys have copies of this. My name is Mark Ryman, 11 Squire Lane, Mifflinville, and I'm standing with a letter from Kristen Chapin. I believe it's 202 West 3rd Street in Mifflinville. She had emailed me this morning and asked if I would represent her with her remarks since she's traveling out of the country. So, let me take my glasses off so I can see.
Speak up, Mark.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Mifflin Township Planning Commission. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kristen Chapin. I appreciate the opportunity to address the commission. Unfortunately, I'm currently out of the country and unable to attend. I have asked Mark Ryman to read this statement on my behalf. I respectfully request that this statement be entered into the public record. Tonight's meeting concerns much more than a conditional use application. It concerns whether the legislative actions taken by the elected Board of Supervisors to protect the citizens of Mifflin Township will be given meaningful effect or rendered ineffective through timing alone. On May 11, 2026, the Board of Supervisors enacted Ordinance 2026-511 after determining that data centers present unique impacts requiring additional regulation. The ordinance established comprehensive standards governing technological infrastructure, including siting requirements, environmental protection measures, operational standards, permitting requirements, and decommissioning obligations. The board made the legislative determination that these standards were necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the township. That legislative finding deserves great weight. Yet today, the data center applicant takes the position that the first and largest data center proposed after that ordinance was enacted is exempt from those protections because its application was filed during the 30-day period before the ordinance became effective. That conclusion raises significant legal and policy questions. The Planning Commission's draft recommendation acknowledges the ordinance 2026-511 reflects important public health, safety, and welfare considerations, despite concluding that it was not effective when the application was submitted. If those standards are sufficiently important to rely upon when recommending conditions of approval, why are they not being applied through the ordinance that was enacted specifically for this type of development? More importantly, I respectfully request that the township identify the legal authority supporting its position, specifically what provision of the PA Municipalities Planning Code requires this application to be reviewed under the former ordinance rather than Ordinance 2026-511. What Pennsylvania appellate court decision requires that result? Was ordinance 2026-511 legally enacted on May 11, 2026? If it was legally enacted, what legal authority prevented its standards from being applied to the very project for which it was written? Was the 30-day delayed effective date required by Pennsylvania law, or was it a discretionary decision? If it was required, please identify the specific statutory authority. These are not rhetorical questions. They go directly to whether the township has correctly interpreted and applied PA law. I also asked the Planning Commission to determine whether the application was in fact duly filed. Specifically, on what date was the application determined to be complete? Who made the determination? Were all required plans, studies, reports, and supporting documents submitted with the original application? Were any deficiencies identified by the township? Were additional materials submitted after the initial filing? These questions matter because Pennsylvania law distinguishes between an application that is merely submitted and one that is properly filed in accordance with applicable requirements. Beyond the legal issues, there is an equally important issue of legislative intent. The Board of Supervisors spent months developing ordinance 2026-511 because it concluded that data centers require enhanced regulation to protect neighboring property owners, emergency services, public infrastructure, environmental resources, and the long-term interests of the township. If the township's interpretation is correct, then the first data center proposed after the ordinance was enacted is permitted to avoid the very protections the board concluded were necessary for the public. I respectfully ask, if these protections were necessary on May 11th, why was a process created or permitted that allowed the very project the ordinance was written to regulate to avoid those protections? That question deserves a clear answer. Finally, if the Planning Commission concludes that the previous ordinance governs the application, I respectfully request that it recommend every reasonable condition necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Mifflin Township. The Commission's own draft recommendation recognizes that the standards contained within Ordinance 2026-511 recommend or reflect legitimate public health and safety concerns. Those concerns in the full ordinance should be fully incorporated into any recommendation made to the Board of Supervisors to the maximum extent permitted by law. In addition, Solicitor Brando had already prepared the Planning Commission's recommendation to the Board of Supervisors before the Planning Commission meeting was held and before the public had opportunity to comment. If accurate, that means the recommendation was drafted for approval before the meeting and before public input was received. Residents deserve a process that is transparent and demonstrates that public comments are genuinely considered before recommendations are finalized. The citizens of Mifflin Township deserve nothing less. I want the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors to understand that these issues are of great importance to me and many members of the community. If this application is approved without full compliance with ordinance number 2026-511, I am prepared to pursue every legal remedy available, including appeals, judicial review, to ensure that the law is properly applied and that the legislative intent of ordinance 2026-511 is honored. This is not intended as a threat, but as a statement of my commitment to protecting the interest of Mifflin Township. I ask that this application receive the careful legal scrutiny it deserves and that every decision be supported by clear statutory authority and the evidentiary record. The decisions made here will shape our township for generations. I intend to remain actively involved throughout the process and will pursue every lawful avenue to ensure these issues receive the thorough review they warrant. Thank you for your time and your service to the township and your careful consideration of these important issues. Respectfully, Kristen Chapin. Okay. I also have a list here from our supervisor, Rick Brown, back here, who wasn't sure he could speak, and he has a list of things he'd like to see, and I know you guys have that, but for the public to hear it. It's ideas I would like to see in the conditional use permit to allow it. We're not reviewing the plans, they're only for information on the site. This is not a land development plan, okay? This is not a land development plan at this point. Archaeology study, especially for Native American artifacts, digs and study, since this was a big Native American area. He would like to see that. A PennDOT traffic study and a study to see what damage would be done to the road. A requirement to hook to aqua lines at the developer's cost, not aqua cost. No drilling of wells. The Berwick Area Joint Sewer Authority to hook up to outrigger at outrigger's cost. Setbacks of 1,000 feet from any residence, 450 from the buildings on the other side of the interstate. Buffer walls, sound absorbing wall along the interstate. Length of property preferably on the east side of Route 80. Backup generators on the west side of the building, only allowed when power is out and only to do shutdown. Test runs one at a time during daytime hours. All stormwater must be held in large enough detention ponds so it can filter back into the aquifer, not outflowed into the creek. Maximum amount of water draw limits, and a $10,000 escrow for the township's engineering to review this land and land development. Thank you.
Just a brief comment in regard to Ms. Chapin's statement. I want to be clear. As part of my job as solicitor, I have to provide legal advice to the commission, to the committee, to the solicitors. Part of that will occasionally involve me providing them with a legal overview of plans, which is what I did by preparing a proposed set of recommendations saying this is something to consider. Obviously, they can make their own determinations in matters of practice.
Understood.
Okay. Is there any further? I see a hand all the way over there.
My name is Ray Rose. I'm a resident of town, and I was chairman and co-chairman of planning in Bloomsburg for several years.
Can you provide your address, sir? I'm sorry to interrupt. Your address, sir.
He gave you.
You're sitting here.
You can provide your address, sir.
Oh, which one do you want? I have two.
Closest one to Mifflin.
360 Second Street.
Thank you.
But anyhow, I never conducted a meeting where the chairman don't conduct the meeting. Why are you conducting the meeting?
I understand that. So in situations where you have committees that are, or I should say in this case, commissions that are somewhat informally meeting, or where we have matters that have a lot of legal implications, the solicitor does sometimes have to take over. And in this particular case, our commission only meets as necessary. They don't have a monthly meeting schedule, okay? And it's been a little rough, let's say, around the edges. So to make sure that everything is followed, you're having the solicitor go through the process. That's essentially it. When it comes time for deliberation, that's when hands are off and they do what they want.
But it is abnormal because I have attended a lot of training and conducted meetings, and I never had a solicitor that had to come to my meeting and run my meeting floor. I don't understand why the chair.
What do you really want, Ray?
Run the meeting.
What do you really want? You need something you want?
Sir, you were up there falling asleep as this last gentleman speaking. Come on, stop.
What's that?
You were up there falling asleep
Whoa,
as
whoa, whoa,
last
no,
time.
we're not gonna,
Stop.
we're not going to engage in a conversation. I'll turn it back. You're raising your hand. I'm happy to call on you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, sir. My name is Tracy Krebs.
Sorry, Tracy, what?
Tracy Krebs. I live over on 810 Mary Street. I've lived at 810 Mary Street since 1977, excuse me. We moved here. I've had family here. I'm worried about the air control, quality of our air, more than anything in the world. I've got a 14-year-old girl I'm raising. I have COPD and problems with my lungs because of a plant that I work at. Is this place gonna be worse? Is it gonna affect my lung problems? That's my question. You know, we all grew up here. It's our town. We need to stand up for it, and we need to know these information. The water, electricity, is it gonna jack up on us? Because our water prices are gonna go up. What's it gonna do to our ozone? We have to worry about that. They're using diesel just as bad as our gas, but diesel's worse. permit on that, what footprint is that gonna have? What about our water? What about for our fishing? I mean, a lot of guys fish up and down the Susquehanna River like crazy, come on. We don't wanna add any more pollution, that's already been done to it from upriver. That has been done up from upriver for years. I mean, we got farmland here, is that gonna ruin our farm crops for our cattle? I mean, how many farmers do we have in here right now? Is there anybody who has farmland? You got Ladini's farm right up here? We got Pliny's farm up here? He's got animals. God forbid, I hate to see anything happen to them, what about our animals? People got their little livestock around, they got chickens in their yards and stuff like that. But please think of our kids too, our grandkids, and our lungs, your lungs, your health. Is there a possibility for radiation? Cancer? You don't need that. God forbid. I give up the rest of the floor, but I would like to get some answers on that. I mean, our lives mean more than a gas center.
I would call you, but this gentleman here hasn't gone yet, so I wanna get legal this.
Wayne Ryan, 109 Market Street. I know some of the concerns people have here, number one, electric. They're gonna pay their share of electric bill. We're not gonna be passed on to the town of Mifflinville to pay what they don't wanna pay. Water, that they're gonna also pay their share of water. And the other thing that always seems to happen with these companies that come into these residents, they ask for tax incentives. They don't wanna pay the taxes. That's not right. They're $1 million companies. They need to pay their fair share of taxes, so us in Mifflinville, not the state of Pennsylvania, Mifflinville, benefit from tax incentives.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Okay, now, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Megan from 6 Henry Street. I'm just going off of what some of other residents have said. I grew up living in a farm, and I was raised on a farm here in Escatec, and I am so happy I was, and it's such a privilege. So to see some of the things that are happening here, it's very disheartening. I'm very upset that we are sacrificing farmland for corporate greed. I think that a lot of people here would agree with me on that. And I think that a lot of you probably have grandchildren that would benefit from enjoying rural land to still exist. And I would like to see that too.
I see hands going up, let's do, say, 3 more, and then we're gonna move on to the next phase.
As I look at the map, I have 2 questions that would be directed to the data centers that I would direct to our commissioners to follow up, or our planning committee to follow up on.
Can you state your name, sir?
Ron Zimmer, 88 Hoffman School Road. I'm sorry. The first one is, she just stated, the lawyer from the data center stated it was 700 feet to the Jehovah's Witness building. The other gentleman here from the data center said they needed 350, 450 feet. So as I look at the map and I look at Google Earth, I don't see that being 700 feet away. Unless there's a huge difference between the space between the data center and Route 80. I don't see 700 yards there. The other thing, 700 feet. The other question I have, we're looking at a 400,000 square foot data center. We're looking at 132,000 square feet substation area, and we're looking at 163,800 square feet switching area. Now, if I look at Google Maps again, and I draw a line from where that switching area is to here Rose Aiton house, I am well under the 1,000-foot limitation. So right now, they're not bound by the 1,000-foot restriction because of them sneaking the application in before the 30-day period, which never should have been permitted. But now that they've snuck it in there, they're not bound by that. Nothing, not bound by height restrictions, nothing in this, what was presented, there's nothing in there about height. So now we're being told that we're gonna conform to all of your standards. Well, I don't know that I can believe that. So I'd like those two distances to be challenged and see what that distance is. Poor Rose Aiton. God bless her, waking up and looking at the data center right out her front window for the rest of her life. And we all know what's gonna happen when she's done, and her kids don't wanna live here. We're gonna look at two to three more huge data centers right in our valley. So we better tighten up on the regulations right now.
Black, I live at 317 East Third Street. Sorry, speaking up there, really. I just like to voice some concerns of mine. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Mr. Raleigh and Operator LLC and the developments they tried to do in Lancaster County. It did not go so well. I highly recommend everybody looks into that. There's obviously not enough time for me to explain everything. They tried some shady things, and obviously they're not gonna be building because the public found out, the supervisor found out. Second, if I'm mistaken, and I'm not informed correctly, the Shaker's lawyer, was our solicitor back in 2020 when the last time that the zoning things and stuff like that were.
Potentially, like to be the case. I believe you represented that before, you were at one time solicitor, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is his timeline correct roughly, or?
I don't think that's, it wasn't that far back.
And the other concern would be with you, sir, like how you're playing both sides of this in different municipalities, townships. How, like, I don't know why.
Sure, I'm happy to address that again, I have addressed that before. So to be clear, as an attorney, my job is to represent the interests of my clients, right? Whether my client happens to be, in this case, it's Mifflin Township. So my obligation is to not the whole of Mifflin Township, specifically the Board of Supervisors and while I'm here at the Planning Commission, okay? So my obligation is to represent their interests, to make sure that they comply with the rules, and that's it. When I'm representing someone who is a data center developer, by way of example, then I am obviously representing them in an area where I am not representing the municipality. And I am obviously dealing with a data center situation here, for example, where I don't know anything. Obviously, I've met Mr. Raleigh and Attorney Schulze at the previous meetings, right, and through the correspondence they've had with the municipality, but I don't have any other relationship with them whatsoever. The key thing is to be uniform in application in terms of what you're doing and to abide by the ordinances that are in place in the municipality where you're at and to uphold the law there. So that is essentially what I do, and that is why it's not a conflict issue if that's your concern. And my intention here is to represent the interests of the Mifflin Township Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. That's it. Okay.
I agree with that, but I forgot to mention one thing. Could I throw that out?
As long as name, address, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, Mark Ryman, 11 Squire Lane, Mifflinville. Ms. Chapin of 202 West 3rd Street, I think it is, had also said her real concerns basically, she would like to see the new ordinance followed. That was basically what she, and I forgot to mention that.
I understand, absolutely. All the way in the back now. Yes.
Nancy Fisher, I live here in Mifflinville. Is there any reason, I've been attending the meetings. One lasted at the Township building until 10 o'clock. One lasted until 11. Last month, the meeting here at the social hall, we had 150 people here. Is there any reason that we cannot abide by that 180 day? Why is this being forced on us so quickly? Why can't we adhere to that 180 days?
So the reason we couldn't do the 180-day curative amendment, which is what you're thinking about, is that is when you do not provide for use at all, and you have to do the curative amendment, because if you don't, then you're essentially excluding it, and they can come in and do their own curative amendment, which can be very, very bad.
Okay.
Because then they can set whatever standards they want, all right? I didn't want to set a standard that we would not have a catch-all provision precisely for situations like this, where there might be an application before we have a chance to enact something. If we try the curative amendment, it probably wouldn't be valid, all right? So we wouldn't have that moratorium time. And if we did something and they brought it in, as long as we've consistently stated, and we have, the law, which is that we have a catch-all provision, then we can use that catch-all provision to provide safety protocols, even if there is something that's done out of turn. So that's the rationale.
Okay, but then what about the changes that these Schaefers are making? That should not fall on us. If they presented something, their attorney, the guy from Georgia, they presented something months ago. Now all this is being changed, and that is not right for the citizens. It's, you know, there's 2 people in this building that are gonna benefit from that, and 150 that aren't gonna benefit. So I think the planning commission, the supervisors, you as our solicitor, yeah, you need to look out for all of us.
Certainly keep in mind that we will be doing deliberations, and we will be providing for whatever conditions the board ultimately
There's
decides
a
on.
gentleman over here that's been waiting and waiting.
Well, I already pointed to her, but then, sir, after you'll be next, and then we're going to close it, just so we can move on to the application presentation, because I think there are a lot of questions, and questions are best answered with information, as opposed to commentary.
My name is Charlene Simmer, and I'm at 88 Hopdale School Road. And I just want to say, the fact that they applied within the 30-day makes us feel very uncomfortable, because we don't think that the ordinance that the supervisors agreed to is going to be totally followed. Word of mouth will not stand in court. There has to be documentation, there has to be an agreement. And so we are uneasy with that, and I have a question. Can the planning committee tonight deny this and tell them to go back and reply under the new ordinance that was already selected by the supervisors?
Lawfully, they can't, well, let me put it this way. I have a legal opinion on that. And there's a reason, I'm gonna say it very.
It's yes or no, sir.
No, hear me out. Whoa, we talked about talking out of turn.
Be transparent.
There's a reason why I don't want to provide it, and it doesn't have to do with protecting anyone's interest but the commission's interest in terms of what that answer would be. But suffice it to say, there was a reason why I wouldn't say you can't just you take it and put it under this existing ordinance, unless I decide it can be done that way, and maybe it will. Let's see what they present. Okay? I don't want to prejudge anything and start making legal statements about things when we haven't seen the full presentation.
But this is why we are here, because when we left back in May, we thought it was a done deal to what was going to be done, and then they applied under the old ordinance with the old setbacks. If you go ahead with that and it goes to the supervisors and they approve it, at that point, we're stuck. We've lost. Everything we did in May was for naught, okay? And so this is why we're suspicious. And then, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be offensive, but I know you have to defend your client. But when you defend the status center, and then you come and you tell the people, we're gonna defend you, and all this nonsense goes on, lots of red flags, okay? So.
And I appreciate that. Just understand there's going to be a difference between my relationship with people of Mifflin Township and their representatives in particular, and my relationship with people in other municipalities where I would be representing, if I was going to represent a data center or any other thing. Keep in mind, I represent private citizens also on things like zoning appeals.
And I understand that.
But those are obviously municipalities where I don't have representation. So, sir.
Tony Darrington, Mifflin X Road.
So one quick point is, understand these gentlemen up here are part of this community too. They're not gonna be subjecting any of you to something that they're not gonna be putting up with themselves. I mean, Mark lives right up on top of this project. So just before we get too adversarial, understand, they're part of the community too. My main point is there an actual tenant for this project? And is this kind of more, this part of the broader Salem project? Because I've seen, there was one huge project in Virginia, and I heard another one in Texas, where the underwriting, I think it was BlackRock, just pulled their funding from it. They can't find a tenant to go into the building. They pull their funding. Now you got a data center that's half built and there's nobody to go into it, nobody's doing construction, the place is bankrupt, and now what are you left with? So is there actually somebody guaranteed to be moving into this thing, or is this a build it and maybe they'll come?
It's a fair question, sir. Thanks for asking. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I think everyone's had at least a chance to comment. If they want to, if there's no new person who wants to comment at this time, then what I'd like us to do is move on to the presentation so that we can have that, and then we can move on to our deliberation.
Hi, good evening again, Deborah Schultz, on behalf of the applicant, also with me is Steve Rowley and Moore on behalf of Outrigger, as well as Thomas Dredd, who's our professional engineer. As I mentioned when I first spoke earlier, the applicant is entirely committed to complying with the new ordinance, and I'm gonna explain to you how we're gonna do that, in addition to the fact that the plan is the same plan that we presented before. When we get to the point of the hearing, it's a little different with the planning commission process. When we get to the point of the hearing, it's gonna be more of a formal Q&A, and I'm gonna walk my witnesses through each and every requirement of the ordinance and show either how it's demonstrated on the plan or through documentation that we're going to be providing, and asking my client if he's willing to agree to accept those as conditions of approval. Now, every decision I've ever been involved with, I've been doing this for 26 years now, the board, if they do approve the application, they're gonna make it subject to the plan itself, as well as the testimony, evidence presented at the time of the hearing. So we can't say we're gonna do this and then have it not be enforced. Again, the setbacks are the same now as what we've shown all along. They're the closest, and Steve's gonna go into more detail on this in a moment, but across the street to the Jehovah's Witness, I believe it's 450 feet. And then on the other side, I think the closest resident across the street is a little over 700 feet. The ordinance itself, the new ordinance has a provision for a waiver, with respect to property owner, who can waive the setback that would impact them. But again, this plan, it hasn't changed. I will say, just in full transparency, this is just a conditional use stage, so it is more of a sketch plan. It does have details, a lot more details than what we previously presented. But the real nuts and bolts of the design is gonna come at the time of land development. That's when all the stormwater management is gonna be fully designed, it's gonna be reviewed, preliminary plan and a final plan will be reviewed again by the planning commission, board of supervisors, county planning commission will weigh in on it. And of course, there's a number of other oversight by other regulatory third-party agency permits that are gonna be reviewing everything as well. And believe me, there's a full list of that. So, assuming we even get through the municipal, local process, there's still a number of other, third-party permits that we comply with. As I stated, during the course of land development, there may be some adjustments to the building location and potentially the building may get smaller, it's not gonna get larger, but it's still gonna be compliant, it's still committed to complying to the setback requirements. So, there may be things that come up through the design and because of stormwater management that may have to slightly adjust things. But again, as I mentioned, the compliance can really be something that the township addresses through imposition conditions, assuming they're reasonable, and we're already telling you up front that we think it's reasonable to comply with your new ordinance. I know there's a number of items that were read with respect to comments that Supervisor Brown had, and I'm gonna let Steve speak to that, but I believe all of those are acceptable to us. And again, this is just the first step in the process. There's many more to come, and the public will be completely involved in every step of the way. So as we go through the design, there'll be more input from everybody.
Steve Rowley, 12600 Deerfield Parkway, Alpharetta, Georgia. Rowley, R-O-W-L-E-Y. Okay, so maybe we'll talk real quick about data centers, and then I tried to keep notes on what everyone was asking, and I would like to go through each one of those. Hopefully I at least address them. Maybe they don't, you don't love the answer, but I'm gonna try and address every single one. So up front, I understand data centers are this big, scary kind of, unknown, who's the end user, what is it gonna do to our environment? And I get the nervousness, I totally understand that. I think we need to take a step back. This property is already zoned industrial, and there's other industrial uses that are so much worse than a data center that could go. So you could get a distribution center that has 1,000 trips a day, jamming this whole intersection up and providing nowhere near the amount of tax revenue that a data center will provide. So a data center, from a commercial standpoint, is about the best use that a municipality can have. Because you're gonna get the most amount of taxes, compared to any other industrial use, the most amount of taxes with the least amount of impact on the city. So from a fire standpoint, from schools, you're not adding 10,000 new people here. From school, taxing on schools, that's low. From policing, that's low as well. I think someone asked kind of what taxes do we think this will generate. That's a little hard to know until the building is fully assessed. So I can tell you the building will probably cost $500 million, and then the stuff that goes inside the building will probably be at least that amount. And so that, the way that they assess taxes is they look at what they assess the building at, just like they would assess your home, and then they give you a millage rate, and that's what you end up paying. So depending on what is assessed will translate down to kind of the county, the city, and then also the school taxes. So I think taxes is number one. I think a few people asked about traffic. This facility, if it stays the same size, should have somewhere around 100 to 150 employees. Could be 50 employees, depending on how many shifts are run. So it could be 50, 50, and 50 for a three shift kind of day. 50 cars is not that big of a deal compared to some other kind of industrial uses. And these jobs are high paying, they're high security. What goes into these buildings, the end user significantly cares about. And so, they're very conscious about security, about fire risk. They're gonna work with the city and the emergency responders to have a plan, to go through that plan before the building is finished, to have all of their questions answered and have kind of a preset plan in case something does go wrong. I can tell you though, the people that own these buildings, that own the data centers and operate them, like every single second that they're down, they're losing money. And so they care about doing things the right way, and they don't want to cut corners. I think we should also remember, like on the north side, there's a chemical distribution facility. On the south side, there's a concrete plant. On the sort of northeast side is Interstate 80 with trucks and cars running back and forth all day long. We were actually there today. We did a decibel measurement, and it was over 80 for most of the time. So the stuff that we've stipulated to is actually going to be quieter than the interstate. I know that was concerned before. And let me go through this thing. We talked about noise. Again, I get without understanding what we were actually doing, it probably looked like we were trying to do a bait and switch. I get that feeling. We're trying to now tell you that that was not the intention at all. We're going to stipulate to agree to the ordinance that we all worked so hard on to get passed. Okay, so we're not saying, hey, let me try and have less setbacks because we came in early. Okay, we came in early because we had to get the process going. And so, if there was that feeling that we were trying to snake something on you guys, we weren't trying to do that. So this plan here is exactly the same plan that we've been talking about the whole time. Let me just kind of go through these real quick. So if you look here, there's going to be berms and lots of arborvitae trees that are kind of going around the facility. We drove around the entire facility today. Once the berm and the trees are up, it literally is going to block most of the data center, period. Right now there's some grain silos on there. If you drive around and you see the grain silos, that's, depending on which grain silo that you're looking at, that's where the building is gonna be. And so, for the most part, those are hidden. And right now, you know, there's no trees that run here, and there's no trees that run here, and no real trees that run on this side either. So, that's gonna improve the look. One thing we didn't mention is that we should know, we probably are going to need to relocate this road, just kind of turn it down a little bit, but we don't have that fully designed yet, and so we'll come back and talk more about that. Okay, so let's talk about the well. Okay, I'm not calling on people, I love to hear what you're saying.
Just to be clear, it's not a question and answer session, this is for their presentation to the planning commission. I appreciate the interest, but we have to do it in order. So after that, there's going to be questions from the planning commission. If the planning commission feels like they want to open it up a little bit at that time, they could. But they do their presentation first. So if you have that question, keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. So the well comment is a mistake. So just in full transparency, probably a year ago when we were starting to put this together, there was a potential well that was gonna be there. That's before we had talked to anyone here. That was before we had actually talked to Aqua, and that plan note actually made it through. So we made a mistake. You know, I'm gonna fix that. That'll be cleared up, and that'll be taken off. Again, we're sorry that was a mistake.
After you printed them?
Yeah, I mean, we made a typo. Like, that should have been off. It's like, you know, 1,000 different details on there, and we just missed that one. Okay, so I apologize. And again, so we're stipulating that we're going to connect to the Aqua water system. Okay, we're stipulating that we are going to connect to the Berwick sewer system. Okay, so if they require us to do something, we're going to do it. It's going to be on our cost. You know, just in general on power, everyone's always worried about their power bills going up. So I can't promise you that your power bills aren't going to go up, but what I can promise you is this project is not going to cause your power bills to go up. Okay, think of these power lines. I mean, they go on for hundreds of miles, and whether this data center goes here or it goes somewhere else, that capacity is going to get sucked up. We're actually contributing to the sewer, to the water, to the power improvements for the city, and that's something that we are doing out of our pocket. So there's nothing but positives there on top of the tax revenue that we talked about. Okay, so we talked about no wells, talked about public water. Who is the end user? We don't have an end user yet. We're engaging with lots of different ones that are interested in that, and in the future we will share that for sure with the public and for sure with the board of supervisors. Trout fishing, again, I do love fishing. We are not going to be negatively impacting this stream or other streams that, I mean, I don't think there's any other streams, but we're not going to be negatively impacting that. Diesel generators, I mean, I think pretty clearly on here it says generator. So, I mean, we don't know exactly where, I think someone's asking where is the diesel tank. So, I mean, we just kind of consider that one big, it's not one piece of machinery, but it's all kind of together. So when it says generator, that's kind of the general area that we think is going to be, but that's where the tank would be located. The new easement on the power line, so this plan is with the new easement. So the PP&L is increasing the capacity on those lines, but they're probably not going to be done with that for 4 or 5 years. So that I don't want to say has nothing to do with us, because we're not really utilizing that new easement. But what is shown on the plan here is the new easement that's already been taken care of by them. New easement power line. Okay, so traffic. So yeah, we will have a traffic study done before the August meeting. I know that was a concern, but again, if I'm you guys, I'm worried a lot more if this thing doesn't get passed with 1,000 trucks coming in and out and jamming up that intersection. Way worse than 50 employees or 100 employees, which is not very much. Future plans for growth. I have no future plans to go to the Aiton's land or go to anyone else's land. I've not talked to any of the other landowners about expanding data centers. I mean, we're not related to any of the other data centers that are in Hazelton or any of those other towns. We have nothing to do with them. Us as a company, we have data center stuff and interest kind of in lots of different places, but nothing kind of in this general region. Somebody said Lancaster. I have no idea what that development is. So that has nothing to do with me. Ricky, I think you had some questions here, so, yeah, so first off, this isn't the land development plan, this is the conditional use plan. So this is sort of the early stage, we're trying to get as much feedback from the public and from the planning commission as we can. But archaeological, yes. PennDOT traffic study we talked about, yes. Aqua we talked about, yes. No drilling the wells, correct. Berwick sewer, correct. 1,000-foot setback and 450-foot setback that we've been talking about the entire time. Although lots of people want to say that we've changed, we are stipulating the same thing we talked about for months, and that everybody has worked so hard on. So same thing. Buffer and walls. So we're voluntarily putting these trees up and some of the berming. If we need to put up greater kind of sound protection on the generators, we're willing to do that, and that's a pretty easy technology. So that's not like a big ask, and we're going to be doing that. So we absolutely are committed to doing what's right. Another question, backup generator kind of timing. Like we'll absolutely work on doing the generation kind of in the middle of the day whenever we need to keep the maintenance going and all of that. Talked about stormwater. So not only data centers, but I do lots of industrial development all over. Stormwater is a major concern for us. Okay, we want to get the water away from the building into the detention ponds, filtered the correct way, and eventually kind of pass on. So detention ponds, we are all over. We're not just like, hey, let's see what happens when it rains and cross our fingers. Like that is a major part, and Tom can talk a little bit more about that as well. Max draw limits. Yeah, so we're talking about, I think right now 20,000 gallons per day of water usage, which is significantly less than when we came in originally. I know there was a lot of concerns about that, so we've reduced the amount of water that is required. So it's much less. The other thing too, we're going to be doing a closed loop system. So it's sort of like your car. Okay, occasionally you have to fill it up with some antifreeze or a little bit of water, but for the most part, it stays in there, and it's sort of the same technology, but just more expensive. We're okay with a $10,000 either bond, or if we need to put $10,000 in for the township engineering to review it. We talked about the timing on the generator testing. Yeah, again, like the power, we're paying for extra upgrades that'll help the city. We're paying for extra water upgrades that'll help the city. We're paying for extra upgrades to upgrade the sewer and take care of like all of these people that live over here that are super frustrated with us. We're paying to upgrade your sewer system, okay, as well. We're willing to do that. And again, I think we talked about the setbacks, that nothing is changing. So I'll stop there, maybe turn the time over. Love to answer your question. I just don't want to get in trouble.
I'll be very short,
Okay.
because honestly, Steve.
I think Steve stole your
Steve stole, I was gonna say, Steve stole most of my thunder. The one thing I wanna say, or two things.
First, sir, remember
Sorry.
your name and
Tom Dredge with DREDGE with Langen Engineering. So Steve already mentioned the well and tying into Aqua. First of all, the well on the plan, I'm gonna follow the story. That was my mistake. I missed that on the plan when it was submitted. It's already been changed. The well is no longer on a revised plan. So we'll be tying into Aqua's lines. And then just the second thing, as far as stormwater goes, the kind of the four dark green areas are the proposed stormwater basins. That's very conceptual at this point. When we get to the land development process, we are gonna have to design those. There's very strict regulations, both at the township level, the conservation district, and DEP require very specific requirements for stormwater, for infiltration and water quality. So those will be addressed. So I think that's all I have for now.
So is that your presentation at this time?
It is.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
So at this time, one moment. At this time, it is the commission's ability to ask questions. They can also, if they want to open it up to the public room, if someone wants to raise their hand and the commissioner is interested in allowing it, permit you to ask a question on their behalf. Okay? That's how that will work. So the commission, you guys are now open to ask any questions you want of the applicant. And if you feel like someone really should have an opportunity to ask a question, you want to say, well, I think you had a question that you'd like to have answered, I'll make you hear it, that's fine too. Okay?
Brad, I'll start with you. You have any questions?
generators, about how many are proposed?
Steve Roller, we don't know right now, so ultimately it depends on the final size of the building. But, so, I mean, that's a positive thing. This could go from 397 to 350 or 250. I don't know, we're still trying to figure that out. But you're probably, I don't know, right now it's probably 4 or 5 generators, but I mean, anything I say, you're gonna hold me to. So that's my best guess right now, and I think that's what we're looking at.
And what is your position?
I'm one of the co-founders and managing partners of the firm.
If you don't have a tenant in mind, how do you know how to build this?
So there's probably 80% of the data centers that are out there are all the same. Maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit smaller, but like literally we are building a rectangle. It is not that rocket science of a building. The stuff inside of it is beyond anything I can understand. But Ben and I can build a rectangle with great drive lanes, detention ponds, and all of that stuff, which is sort of a normal industrial development, but for what's going inside it. That's kind of really the only difference, and a little bit of the power connection with the substations. That's the only difference between like a normal industrial building or a warehouse and a data center, but for what's inside it.
The Ayton Road, as I looked at the map, it looks like it goes between the data center and the substation right now. And you're saying that may change?
Yeah, I think more than likely it will change and we'll follow the process. But right here, the Schaefers are going to continue to live here. And so, and so the road relocation is probably going to come down here, and then just to keep everyone from driving. You don't want someone driving into the data center every single time the Ayton's come in and out. So we're just going to try and make it easy, and it's going to come down here and then down to Ayton Road that way. So just sort of separate the two uses. There will be a guard station here, a guard shack, and so no one will be able to go in and out of the data center. But just to have some more separation is ultimately what we're going to be going for. Yeah, sorry. So it's just like kind of where this is their house, and then it's just going to kind of go. And again, this might shrink a little bit. This might get a little bit bigger, but sort of down here, and then run along kind of the property line where that green fence space is.
Somebody had a question on the fuel for the generators. That, I'm assuming, would be on site, a certain number of gallons?
Yeah, diesel fuel generators are above ground. Truck would come in and fill it up. As much regulation as there is on like trout ponds and stuff, like there's even more regulation on that. So like that's huge. I mean, if you have a spill, there's like an environmental procedure you have to follow. There's reporting guidelines. So like that, even though diesel generators sound messy, like they're very, very particular about the safety related to that. I think the other thing too is we don't want to forget we're on I-80. I mean, so there's diesel trucks driving by all day long and spewing stuff all day long. So I mean, we understand. Is that what is it?
In most of what we find here, it talks about for residential purposes. Is there anything as far as the Helena Chemical that, a commercial operation, any of this applies to them, or are they kind of out of the, setbacks and all that kind of thing for the chemical?
Yeah, do you mean from like a setback from the building and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so they're actually really far away because I think this, Tommy, I'm going to grab my paper here, but I think this up here, this kind of has a different zoning or has a different kind of treatment. So we can't really put anything on this north end of the site. So there's already this huge buffer that's here. But I mean, from what's going on inside the building, and there's fire suppression, all of that is super, super, they care about that a lot. But I guess I didn't really understand your question. Like, there's not going to be any, I mean, I don't know, like, there's not going to be like a road that connects to the chemical facility. I mean, we want as much separation as possible.
How many feet?
I don't know, this is 450, so you probably 450, 900, more than 900, just based on my guess.
Now, I don't know if this would be directed to you or Attorney Brando, But I appreciate the fact, for instance, that you have said that you definitely you're committed to compliance. And there is some wording in here that talks about the recommendation that is here for us to consider.
Is that the document that I provided?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the question for me.
Okay. And what I'm getting to is that we've heard verbal commitment and compliance, but as somebody else said, and I've been involved in contracts in the business world, unless it's in writing, you know, there's a few things you can do with just an oral agreement, but I don't think this is one. Well, so my question really comes down to this. The paragraph down here that talks about that further notes the township has recently enacted the ordinance 2026-5-11, addressing the technological infrastructure which, although not effective at the time of the application.
Just to be clear, and I know that document somehow made it to the public, this was intended as legal advice for you, because it has privilege, so long as you're not reading it to the public. I'm inclined not to recommend reading it to the public. Just because.
Whoa.
What's the big secret then? That being said, it did somehow make it to a member of the public at this point. I don't know how protective it would be. I'm in this weird situation where as your attorney, I want my advice to be privileged, and at the same time, it's been released. I know you have a question.
Okay.
You can waive that, you'll be plenty of that.
Let's take it from the statement that they want to be in compliance, and I believe them, but like I said, unless something is in writing. And I'm concerned that wording in this document is not, shall we say, as strong as what I think it should be.
Okay.
In that it says that it reflects and that it informs, but it doesn't say that they're required to follow the new. That's
Will they be obligated to follow the standards of the new ordinance?
Yes, that's
Okay.
really the question.
If they agree that those will be the conditions of approval all the way through, we'll have, which they appear to be doing, then we will have reliance on that. And we can take that through, we can condition their approval on the conditions within the ordinance, compliance standards, especially the environmental impact. If they're going to provide that by the date, we can condition their approval on a number of things. In fact, above and beyond what I provided, just for certain standard provisions and understanding of zoning, which are provided for this house. Okay? So they've already committed to that, plus they've committed to this additional list. And there are some additional things in here that we can go through, potentially, if you'd like me to go through a few proposed recommendations, I can do that without.
Well, what really are the steps to make sure that that happens?
What you do is, if you are going to approve it, you would approve it on the following conditions, and then you would name those following conditions.
So we should do that tonight?
What I'm saying is if you approve it, that's what you would do. I can't tell you your ultimate decision to make, okay? I can tell you that if you do approve it, all approvals are typically with conditions. I would recommend to you that if you do approve it, you approve it with conditions. And if you would ask me to provide a form for that, I can certainly make a form motion that someone could adopt. So that those conditions would be a part of the approval process.
They don't have to be necessarily detailed before we.
They really don't, because you're ultimately not the decision maker.
Right.
Okay, the Board of Supervisors is. So this will pass with you, the Board of Supervisors, with your recommendations, whether it's approved or denied, whether it's approved with conditions or approved with no conditions, which I don't think is going to happen, but I'll tell you all the options.
Okay.
And ultimately, that is your report to the board of supervisors, and they have to take that and do with it what they will. Okay?
That's all I have, I think. And for clarity, we're committing to it orally and written, okay? However we need to do that documentation paper-wise, we're not trying to just, believe me, we'll do it, you know, on my word. We want to put it into the document and we'll agree to it.
I mean, the township, as you know, your solicitor will advise, is required to provide a written decision. And I suspect it would be, included as part of the written decision with the conditions.
So orally and written, you're agreeing to 100% or more of the conditions?
Of what we say tonight, of the ordinance, you know.
Of the ordinance that's written? Of the new ordinance?
Yeah,
Of
the
the
ordinance.
ordinance,
Yeah.
yeah, with, you know, the corrected, the ordinance that was adopted.
With the language of the recently adopted.
Okay. Is there anything else? Steve, right?
Yes, sir.
How many of these have you built?
We built lots of buildings just like this.
Zero, it's a goose egg.
I mean, I've probably built 20 buildings in the last 10 years.
How many data centers?
Zero.
We built no data centers exactly like this.
No data centers at all?
No,
Like this?
no, I built other smaller data centers
Okay.
like this, but buildings, I mean, we built millions of
I'm
square.
not concerned about buildings, I'm concerned about data centers. So just wanted to get a feel for how many your company has built.
Yes, absolutely, and then it's not just me who builds these things, as a company.
No, what's the number?
Yeah, I don't know the number, I can get back to you.
Okay.
It's probably more than 3 to 5, 10, something like that.
Okay.
I mean, keep in mind, this is a relatively new use too.
I'm just asking the question, you know, I'm not providing any judgment on it, right? How'd you choose, you mentioned about not being associated with any of the others. I don't see that as a problem. Why'd you choose here?
So I mean, the main driver is first, is power available? And so based on where these power lines were, there was some capacity and availability there. And so then you kind of look from I'm gonna give all my secrets away, but you kind of look at where the power lines are, and you look at what sites are available and topography, and, you know, if there was a stream running through the middle of this, like, we wouldn't wanna do it. But it was a big enough site where we could lay out what we think is appropriate for the market, right next to power lines. It's like other projects we've had, you know, you had 5 miles of power lines and a bunch of easements that you had to work through. This is literally right next to power lines, so that's
Right. So you're from Georgia, right?
I'm from Arizona, but I
You live in Georgia. Your company's in Georgia.
no, I think we're a Delaware corporation. We've got offices in Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, Columbus, Phoenix, Orange County, California.
Okay. So how did you become aware of this in all those places? And we're in rural central Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, part of this is like, you see where other data centers are locating, and that leads you to think there's
data centers.
There's interest, right? It's just like anything else, like if there's let's see, like there's a Target somewhere, a Walmart's pretty close. If there's a Lowe's, there's gonna be a Home Depot pretty close. And so, the Midwest historically, you know, kind of, it had a strong manufacturing base, and that has pulled back a little bit. So there's a lot of infrastructure that already is existing, and power capacity generation that's already existing that's underutilized right now. So that's why you're seeing so many data centers kind of coming to Pennsylvania and Ohio and all these states.
So you kind of answered this for me earlier, but are there any sections of the ordinance 2026-511 that you're not gonna follow?
The new ordinance? No, we're committed to following it. I mean, we spent a ton of time with a lot of the citizens here. I mean, like, it wasn't just us coming up with this, or Ricky, or the solicitor. I mean, there was a lot of feedback from a lot of people, and that's how we got there. There's candidly a lot of stuff I don't like, but we're gonna live up to it. We're gonna do it. I do think, you know, it's important to recognize that, again, this is a conditional use hearing, and so we've got a lot of stuff coming for the next meeting. And then there's a ton more stuff that is due before the land development permit is issued. Okay, so there's a lot of other, you know, NEPDs, and, you know, lots and lots of other
So you're making it sound like there's a lot of unanswered questions that you haven't answered yet, that you haven't told us.
No. The way I would look at it is, we were at 30,000 feet a few months ago, we're at 10,000 feet today. We're gonna be at 1,000 feet in a month, and then we're gonna get into, once you get into the actual design, like,
Sure.
I don't know exactly where the detention pond is going, 1 foot this way or 1 foot that way. As soon as Tom designs it, I can tell you, this is exactly where the detention pond is gonna start. Or this is exactly where that building corner is, or this is exactly how many car parking spaces I'm gonna have. Like, I can give you my best guess today, but that could change a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to the way you displayed it, about it made it sound like, to me at least.
I should work on how I.
Yeah, maybe that was all. Good, go ahead.
I got a question for Attorney Miranda. I just want to make sure that everybody, I don't think anybody in this room is in real favor of change. But by law, zoning has to allow this in their zoning, correct?
They have to provide for the use. What that
Provide
means
for the
is-
use. I
Right.
just want everybody to know that in this room.
You can't say, no, the use is not permitted here ever, it's not possible.
And then, I think you did answer this question, but one reason that Township, that Pennsylvania is kind of a hot spot is they have a lot of available existing power, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, think about like the transmission lines, those all connect kind of all over. They go to New Jersey, they go to Maryland, they go to Ohio, they kind of all interconnect, and electrons travel at the speed of light. So we could have a solar field, 100 miles away, generating electrons that actually ultimately powers the grid, which then powers this data center. But we're not doing any on-site generation. I know I said that at the last meeting, but we have other sites that we are doing on-site generation, and it's allowed. We're stipulating here, we are not going to do on-site generation. I'm not building, other than the backup generators, we're not building power plants here or anything like that. We understand.
Was that your question? Was that your question?
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Would you also be willing, Ayton Road is not a good road, obviously. Would you be willing to upgrade Ayton Road?
Yeah, I think when we relocate it, it's absolutely gonna get upgraded from what it is right now.
So from Route 339 to your facility, you're willing to upgrade it?
Yeah, and even all the way over to, Mrs. Ayton, kind of to make it connect over again.
And we had a couple other, okay, to get some comments here? Go ahead.
Patty Roches, 301 West Pine Road. Just a couple things, I know you're talking about detention ponds, I hope they look better than Mifflin Overlook that the town is now paying $500,000 to get that area fixed. We wanna make sure they work, that you're accountable for them, not that they get put in and we have a mess like we already have. The other thing for Pennsylvania, the companies coming here, isn't it right that there is no sales and use tax on the companies? Where Virginia had it, they're moving out of there, and Pennsylvania doesn't have it, so now it's very attractive for the data centers to come here. I think they are working on getting that repealed. The other thing is, with Tom, with Langdon, we wanna make sure this is done properly. I don't know where the study's for, but things are popping up now, that was done, he's provided, built homes and schools over radioactive material. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
It's been popping up on the internet that Langdon, I don't know exactly, I didn't get a chance to read it all, but you had homes and schools built over radioactive material.
It wasn't a site that I was on.
Maybe not
So,
you, but
pretty-
you're,
I don't,
but
don't know that there's
something-
any radioactive materials on this site.
No, I'm not saying that, but if that was done someplace, what are you gonna cover up to do this? So, I mean, this has to be looked into thoroughly, everything has to be done, no word of mouth, written commitments, and properly, and whoever inspects these have to inspect them, and penalties, and stop the progress, not like I said with Mifflin Overlook, the mess that's up there now and stuff like that. So it wasn't done for that stuff. This, if it's going in, has to be done properly to make sure we're all protected.
If I can ask if Ron Zimmer, 88 Hoffman School Road, do you know the distance from your switching area to the Ayton property? And that, I'm assuming that you'll need the 1,000 foot from the switching area, not the data center itself.
The ordinance is building.
You can't say that your switching area is not part of your building. It doesn't have a roof on it, but that's part of what you're building. That's not PP&L's property, that's your property.
So, just to be clear, and I appreciate that there's a desire to comment and respond, but let's make sure that this is a question session more for the public now. And if the commissioners call on you, you'll have a good question to ask to enlighten them so that they can make their decision.
That wasn't a good question?
No, but I'm just saying the commentary afterwards,
Okay,
we just don't want to take up the time.
Well, I'm waiting for an answer if they're going to provide.
Sure.
Well, look at Google Earth, your switching area to the Ayton property does not give her a 1,000 foot setback.
No, I want to, now, what is it, question answered? I'll wait. There's no
I
answer?
guess the question is, setback from the building?
Yeah.
Or is it?
The ordinance is from the building.
Okay.
It's that, I would challenge that as well. The building, the
Sir.
Ron Zimmer, Hoffman School.
No, sir, it's not,
The
sir.
substation and.
Sir. You
get to dictate this meeting.
No,
You do
not.
not.
Hey,
You need to calm down and let that man speak, sir. No, you
It's a
whoa.
matter, this is a matter of a point
Shut the hell up and
of
let the man
order.
speak.
Sir, you.
No, not
I
sir.
would-
It's super ridiculous the way you're treating these people. Let him talk.
I'm trying to make it clear that this is not public comment time. Now, if.
Yeah, it's Q&A and he's asking a question and you're determined interrupting him. Let him alone and let him ask a question.
Sir, he did not, that was not a question.
It just was. It
That
just
was
was
a
a
question. That was a question.
This is mine.
All right, let's keep this
I
up.
hope you people see this, that it is all a scam and they're full of shit.
Robert Jones, 108 Woodfield Drive again.
New inspection. And it was Middletown, sorry, not Lancaster, sir.
Yeah, I'm actually curious about Middletown as well, because Middletown did reject, Township that overall rejected their plans and they
Thank
go
you.
forward, so. It's possible for a township to say no and
Yeah.
vote not go through. But my question to you is, you mentioned about the fire protection, there's gonna be a 400,000 square foot plus the additional footage. You have diesel generators there as well as other potential hazards, especially electricity. How are the fire protections gonna be when we have a very small volunteer fire squad in this area? And I appreciate the volunteer fire. I greatly appreciate them. I used them myself last year. I'm very, very appreciative. But my concern is, how are we gonna be able to have something that's going to be able to have true fire protection? Or EPA hazard that something happened where there's a chemical spill and we have no way to take control of that because we have a volunteer fire. So my question is, how is that going to be mitigated? How is that gonna be handled?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer is, what's in, I mean, we care about the environment, what's inside of these buildings, the owner cares significantly about, so they're gonna be totally protected from a fire suppression standpoint. The other thing is we're gonna work with the local, experts and come up with a plan that works for them, and we're totally committed to that. If that costs us more money, if that costs us more design for the building, we're absolutely.
Here's my follow-up question, because like, I'm very protective of my house, but it could go up in flames any day now. If this happens, spills happen, fires happen. Matter of fact, I worked for a company where we had a 500,000 square foot warehouse that just went up in flames a month ago, Kimberly Clark. Went up in flames. They were very protective over there, because that was $1 billion warehouse that just went up in flames. So I can't have a promise that you're gonna protect it. That to me, a promise is nothing. The problem is that, I know you say you're going to work with the local fire and try to mitigate and work with a plan. From a standpoint of actual citizen population, we don't have to support that. We don't have that to support it. So regardless, you probably have to get 100 volunteer firefighters, if not more, to be able to try to help protect that in case a major spill happens or a major fire happens. I don't think that's gonna happen with the small community that we have.
Sir, I appreciate the lead up, but.
Thank you.
The question.
I appreciate you too.
You said you had a follow-up question.
Yes.
Follow-up question.
Thank you. We mentioned about the ordinances, how you're going to comply with the ordinances, with the new ordinances. This is actually probably a question more to you, the township as well, as much as it is probably the owner, the company itself, is who's going to enforce when they don't follow the rules?
They don't comply, okay.
What happens if they don't? I'm gonna use Trump as an example. I'm sorry, I'm not making it political, but he does what he wants and he says, oh, what are you gonna do about it? So when they go and there's a lot of companies, if you Google any companies, they're willing to pay $1,000 a day fine and continue to break the penalty, break the rules, because that is a lot cheaper to pay $1,000 fine a day than it is to clean up or to fix whatever major problem there is. So promises are promises. I can't keep a promise, you can't have a promise unless I have something in writing. So again, what are we gonna do?
And so let me answer your question.
Sure.
As opposed to so under the municipality's planning code, there's a set procedure, okay? That is to provide a notice of violation, because when you're regulating people's use of their land, they have that initial right to use their land for any purpose that doesn't violate a zoning ordinance or the general police power, okay? You have to provide the notice and opportunity to be heard, and then after that, they have the ability to appeal that. If ultimately the township prevails on proving that there's a violation, and they get their citations thereafter, and they're not correcting it, they will be paying whatever the applicable fine is provided for under the zoning ordinance. That is the maximum extent of the police power delegated to this municipality by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in regards to these things. Now, of course, they violate some other police power related thing, and they were to cause someone harm through some severe negligence or something that was otherwise covered by a different statute or environmental statute, then you could have state enforcement or any number of other things, but that wouldn't be handled at the municipal level. The municipal level will just be notices of violation and subsequent citations.
The additional question that I have is, who is going to ultimately, and I apologize if I don't know the answer, who's going to make the ultimate decision from a committee or commission standpoint to approve where it's going forward?
So there has to be a motion that will ultimately set forth whatever it is the commission will want to do. If that motion is seconded, it will then go for approval. If there is a majority vote, we'll probably do it via roll call for approval, and that motion carries, that decision will carry. If not, then anyone else can make a motion, okay? But ultimately, there has to be a successful motion as to what the approval or the non-approval or the anything will be. So that's the way it works.
Is there a possibility of hiring an independent law firm or someone to kind of represent us as the community for our concerns? Because it's no offense to the commission, but they don't know every single answer. Because you guys are asking questions, you're not gonna know the answer. So can we hire someone independently to kind of say, okay, let's look at this at a fine-tooth comb and make sure that it is airtight, make sure that your actual new ordinances are airtight, because it sounds like they're not airtight right now. Is there a way that we can do that so that we make sure that we ensure that things are not going to be loopholes? Because companies love loopholes. They'll find a way to do it.
That actually leads me to a possibility here, which again, I don't get to make this decision because this is their deliberation, okay? But if they would like me to, I can certainly ask about other possible conditions for approval, go down the list of proposed thoughts that I had, see if they'll commit to those. If there are going to be any objections, ask any questions that I might ask, concerns that I might have. As far as the idea of an independent counsel, there are two ways you can do it for the public. One person has already done this the previous time, which is hired her own counsel and have that counsel appear here. That's how you get personal representation. When it comes to the municipality, because it avoids additional costs of hiring additional firms, it's very common that the solicitor for the Board of Supervisors will also be the solicitor for the Planning Commission, especially because this is just a commission that recommends approvals or not, but the ultimate decision gets made by the Board of Supervisors. Does that make sense?
It does, but still with a broad concern. The last is my last question, I apologize, I took some time. My last question is, what happens, is there an exit plan for when this technology becomes obsolete? Because data centers are new, but I can guarantee you the way that technology is going, in probably 5 to 10 years, this current platform is going to be outdated with data centers. So what is the exit strategy for that?
Yeah, and the reality is data centers actually aren't new. They've been around for 30 or 40 years. They just have gotten smaller and more powerful. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they used to replace these every 5 years, like the servers and the kind of the guts inside of the facility. They get switched out kind of every 3 years now, and then they upgrade to the next fastest kind of processor and equipment. And then it might go to a different data, they might take that and then take it to another data center. But the cutting edge research and the stuff that they do inside of these, they want it to be as high performing as they can.
Thank you.
But the technology is the replacement cycle, like you said, is just getting shorter.
Rick Brown, Mifflin, or 217 East 3rd Street, Mifflinville. One question that's been asked of me, and I didn't know how to answer this, was because this was submitted under the old ordinance, okay, what does that do to the height that was set in the new ordinance? Or do they have to now follow the old ordinance?
Well, that is something where, the way I would look at it is this. First of all, it's a legal conclusion, and you're on the Board of Supervisors, Ricky, so I'm a little loath to mention this, but I would say that either way that you do it, if you're looking at the height limitations, you could say, okay, abide by this. Again, this is a recommendation for this panel. Or you could say, okay, we'll recommend a variance on this to the extent if there is any argument to be made and used. Or we could say, we recommend that you approve it with them applying, abiding by all conditions of the effective ordinance, and that you give effect to that as essentially a variance of this ordinance, where in those very few places, we might have slightly more favorable language, if that's the question. Again, not my decision to follow. Does anyone want to follow on?
Either one of you ladies.
Sorry, I just wanted to our representation of work compliant with the ordinance obviously was including the waiver that was intended to be adopted as part of the ordinance. So I just want to make that clear.
I understand that. With regards to the site, with the house that's going to be at the data center.
Yes.
But the individual could waive that.
And my reading on that is that you'd be looking at a dimensional variance type of thing anyway there with very typically where you have a dimensional variance, regardless of anything else, I'm saying.
We're not, when I spend all this time,
I get what you're saying. Listen, I don't wanna belabor this. You've agreed to abide by the ordinance we enacted, which is the will of the township. You negotiated with the people of the township.
With that,
I know, with all things included in there, good and bad, right? Whoa. We're not having a multi-way conversation this year. We can make that a condition of approval depending on what the board here does, okay? So I understand your position, so I appreciate the information, okay? So, now, we were calling on someone.
Alright, Veronica Grassima, 33 Cabin Run. So since you said you don't actually have a data center going into this building, are you gonna build it even if you don't have a customer willing to go in?
More than likely.
Okay. More than likely, no?
Yeah, I mean, you typically wouldn't start building, it's not like a residential house where some guy will come along and they like the patio. That's not how these work. What goes into them is very specific to the company.
So unless you actually get a buyer for a customer for your building, you're not gonna build?
They already have one.
Yeah.
Okay, because you said you had a couple different people looking into it, but nothing definite as far as.
We're pretty early on in the process.
Okay. All right, and when you contaminate, I guess we've kind of gone over this, but we pretty much know what's gonna happen because it does with all big companies. Are you just gonna pay the fines, or are you going to fix the problem?
We're called on her, and it is a question, so I would ask.
We're gonna do things the right way. The negative implications on shutting down a facility for a few days because we're just trying to, sneak it by. It's, maybe like a warehouse, they would try and do that and they would just hide it, like.
Yeah,
These
well,
things are
it's a
so.
warehouse, that's what you called it
Okay.
initially. Another question is.
We're a large company, we're committing to do things the right way, we have insurance, we have lots of partners, we have a good reputation. I know you think everybody pollutes, like you said, I'm not saying we've never made a mistake, or you make a mistake, you fix it, and we're long-term, and the people that will be in here are long-term, highly invested in the community type of partners. It's exactly if I were a citizen, that's the type of partner I would want. I wouldn't want someone who's in and out in a year. I want someone that spends billions of dollars for my facility and is paying millions and tens of millions in taxes to help the community.
Well, okay.
Okay.
So, you have one road in, are you planning on putting another access road in and out of the facility? Because right now it's just Ayton Road to access.
Yeah, I think I think the plan right now is just Ayton Road, that's the existing road, we'll just relocate it a little bit.
Because I kind of figured you would have to have two ways in and out, and that's just what I was curious about.
Emergency reasons? For emergency, Monica, yeah,
Well,
right.
and that's, I know it's been whispered there as an add-on, but let's ask that question. For emergency reasons, what considerations have been taken into account for emergency access? At this juncture, what will be taken into account for emergency access?
I mean, that's typically part of the land development plan. Okay, so that would come later, but I mean, we're open to good ideas that people have. I mean, I can't, I'm not gonna try and take away, other landowners' rights. So I can't tell you, you know what, I'm gonna just bulldoze through our neighbor's yard. Okay, that would be something that we would need to work with the city and work with our neighbors and work with any other sort of access on. But I mean, we're committed to following the law and following the codes.
Well, I guess that's another question. Is that a requirement to have two access points?
Well, that's a determination as far as the requirement. I do have a list of different things here, but that will go through the saldo process, which is actually a different process. We're probably looking at the ordinance that we have for that at that time, and how they have to go. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you.
What would, it might be speculative, but in answer to your question, would you consider this, as you see it right now, having two access points important? For the safety reasons, et cetera, that's being just talked about? Not holding you to it, I'm just asking the direct question.
I mean, I think we build lots of buildings that have one.
So you think that's sufficient, is what your position would be right now?
Yeah, I think that would work. I'm not gonna go take someone else's land and force them to put a road there.
I have one you are building just a large and, multi-million-dollar project, whether it's chemicals or food. Building in a small town like this where we are constricted on volunteer firemen who do a wonderful job for this community and others, wouldn't it behoove you to build your own and supply your own firefighters? You would have easy access and the people and the products you need on site for chemical or other.
So ma'am, let me make sure, because I know people are having some, sort of a hard time hearing you over here. I think what you're asking is, wouldn't it be a good investment on their part? Or
To have their own
would you
fire
consider
department
investing on your part, to have
within-
your own fire company serving specifically your site in potential emergencies? Is that
Correct. It would be safety issue for them, on-site access to the chemical product to put it down.
I understand the position, ma'am, I just wanna hear what they're, that you did ask a question, you were called on, and so if the applicant would like to answer, I think the commission would appreciate an
Yeah.
answer rather than lying.
Yeah, we've never done that, but we're happy to look into it. We work with the city on coming up with a good plan that works for the city and the cost.
And Attorney Brenda, I just want to clarify one last time, because I'm not sure I completely understood where we left off, but the representation that the applicant made about complying with the ordinance, that was the ordinance that was previously advertised before the board adopted with the changes discussed the night of the meeting, not what was ultimately subsequently advertised.
Yes, and I understand there was an advertising error, where there was a portion of a paragraph that was cut off, which has to be re-advertised and corrected, caused largely by the fact that so many things were changing at the last meeting before the enactment, okay? So that will have to be fixed and corrected, and all that related to was them being able to waive their house so that they can have a house next to a data center, which I don't think is the concern of the municipality so much as whatever concern they would have moving next to a data center, okay?
Then the applicant would believe that they should be entitled, if we're complying with everything under that ordinance, they should also be able to, utilize the height. Although there is an existing height exemption under your existing ordinance under 503 feet, but.
Right, and there are, right, you've mentioned exceptions that exist under the ordinance. It runs parallel with what we agreed to under that, when I say agreed to, the whole community, because we had the attorney, a lot of the land, the property owners in the area here, everyone was discussing it, there was a lot of public comment. So, I get it. That is the ordinance that you've committed to. Understand at this point, I am not going to sit here and say something like, and, you know, the commission, please, they haven't made a decision on it.
I completely understand that.
But I understand what your representation is, okay? So I get that.
Nancy?
Nancy Fisher. The guy from Georgia tonight, and I think I remember this correctly, at one of the meetings, he said those data centers run themselves, and there might be 5 people in there at a time. Tonight, he said there might be 3 shifts of 50, 50, and 50. We have a fantastic police force, but, you know, if you have 50 people going, they're already monitoring speed through town. So you have 50 going in at 7 and 50 leaving. And the thing that Monica said about that road, my gosh, we all know that road. We all went out there when we were kids. That is a little tiny road. If our fire trucks had to go in there, it would be almost impossible.
Ma'am, you're very nice, and I really
Thank you.
hate doing this, but I have to ask you, I understand the lead-in, but we want to keep this to questions at this time.
Okay, I wanna know how many people he is gonna have then, 5 or 50 a shift? Can he answer that?
Yeah, I don't know, I mean,
Obviously.
I'm estimating the number of typical employees in this type of a facility. If it's 300,000 square feet, if it's less, that might be less people. You know, if there's different times of day when, it's not peak. So like all of us in America from 9 to 6, we're all like Googling and ChatGPT during the day. And at night, they don't need as many people there because no one's at 3 in the morning ChatGPT. So they might have fewer people there. So I mean, but I'm trying to be transparent. I don't know exactly how many, that's just an estimate.
And the other thing from the traffic perspective, they're always, when you don't have an end user, they always anticipate the worst case scenario for traffic. So there's a certain ITE standard that they utilize when you don't know tenants that requires that the conservative heights and sensitive traffic.
And again, I talked about the downside. I mean, if you put a warehouse here, instead of 50 trips, you could have 1,000 drills. And so I think that's important to think about as an alternative scenario.
Does the planning commission have any more pointed questions?
No, coming back to, so you're gonna be the landlord, right?
Potentially, there's other scenarios where a big user comes in and buys it.
Okay, but right now, it sounds like your company's gonna be the landlord, right?
For the foreseeable future, that's the business plan.
Right, so you're gonna have a contract with the tenant at some point.
Yeah, typically you have a lease. Yes.
Okay, right.
And then we have agreements with power companies and generation companies.
Yeah, and are there conditions that you have with that tenant that would abide by all the ordinances?
Yeah.
Requirements that we have?
Yeah, yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, typically the lease.
Big dog.
Yes, Pete Deal, Hope Nichols, Schoolhouse Road. My question is, according to that plan, he has 8 road drawn in as it is. Now he's saying about moving that road. Now that's a township road paid for by taxpayer money, maintained by the taxpayers in this township. How can he just assume they just moved that road? And with that road where it's at, can he comply with the setbacks from a township road?
So those are good points. Obviously, you can't just take the township road. You can't, take a road belonging to a municipality and do whatever you like with it. We're going to make that part clear. However, they could enter into an agreement with the municipality to improve the road, which is what I assume is being suggested here, as opposed to taking municipal property. It would be an agreement to improve that road after the construction, so that it goes back to an operating status.
So he could just assume to move it when or wherever they want.
No. There would have to be an agreement ahead of time with the
Okay,
municipality.
and with that, what is the setback from township road for a structure? It's 100 feet, right?
Setback from township roads for
Yeah.
structures?
And if that's the case, can he comply with those setbacks with that road where it's at?
Well, that's going to be an ultimate decision of the board of supervisors at the time they decide to approve or deny. I don't want to get into that too much because we'll go over that a little bit with the board. I understand your question. So of course, the existing ordinance, the ordinance that we enacted provides for that type of a build out there, with the understanding that there are a lot of protections. There's a little give and take. There was a lot of protections added in above and beyond what we had in our ordinance, with a few gives, which were height and certain setback requirements. So that was the ordinance that was enacted recently. With this ordinance, obviously, we have different setbacks. Although I think in the industrial zone, I think it's as high as 100.
Well, in other words, though, that drawing is not complete as it is. If he's gonna move the road, the road should be shown accordingly.
Got a well on it too.
Well, and keep in mind that this is being submitted for the purposes of a zoning permit. So there is a planning process for the actual construction, and at that time, you're right, they do have to lay everything out, but exactly the way it's gonna be, there'll be an as-built plan. But there isn't for this procedure. It's just to provide an overview of what the project is, where it's going to be, and whether or not the use would be permitted, and under what restrictions.
And again, we're committing to improve the road, so whatever your standard is with that.
Patty Grosh's 301 West Pine Road. Just clear understanding, you said that you don't have someone to come into this building yet. And if that doesn't happen, if the data center wants to come into this, does this stop everything? Or does this building go on and then they can say we have to use, we can use it for something else? Like, all this that we're doing, is this just for the data center? We don't get somebody, hey, we're gonna put a warehouse in here, we're gonna do this or that. What legal ramifications are there for that?
So, the legal ramifications are, that's attenuated, and I don't wanna say anything in case we have to ever deal with a situation like that. But the question that you asked was, what do they do under those circumstances? Which I think was the first question you asked, that could apply to the applicant. So that's a valid question. And if you'd like the applicant to answer that,
Yes.
you know.
What happens if you started the building and now you see where data centers are pulling out, you know, they're not committing to where they are, what happens?
What happens if it's no longer a viable project?
Right.
I mean, if there's other uses that are permitted in the industrial zoning district that are allowed by right, and it meets all of those applicable requirements, I mean, that happens all the time, people convert buildings from this use to another use, you gotta make sure your parking works, and then you meet all the other applicable ordinances, but there's no reason why we couldn't, if they put in the future, we change the use if it met the ordinances.
So it would have to come back through and make sure it agrees with everything we want.
Right, and this is for the zoning permit, so as a little bit of a legal lesson, this is very, very generic. If they get the zoning permit, they will have the right for that use at that property. But that doesn't mean that their exact plan or the way they're going to build or any of that has gone all the way through approval. That's the subdivision and land development process. Okay, so this is just for the use, and if they didn't have a viable project, they wanted to change the use, you have to go for a new zoning permit for the new use. Okay?
So it can't just be changed.
Go ahead.
Meg Younger, 610 Ray Street. My question is, has Aqua confirmed that they have enough water to supply a data center, on top of human residential needs for water?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're working with them, and they haven't, said there's not water.
And I will point out that the quick thing to point out is that the ordinance that they're agreeing to abide by that we enacted provides that they must get those approvals from our, for the water. So if they don't get it, they don't get it.
Lori Aiken, 88 Hopewell Road. Has anyone investigated the legitimacy and background of this company that we are offering a data center to?
So, ma'am, not a question the commission can answer and not something that the municipality can engage in, because we can't look at your character when making a determination on this application. But what I can say is that if you want to ask a question, because the planning commission is called on you, you want to ask a question to them about whether or not they're reputable, if you have a question for them about their ability to go through the project, the feasibility, you can ask them.
So no one on the board has checked into these people, who's gonna allow them to come into our whole town and build a data center, and do not know the legitimacy or anything, like the man doesn't even know where he's from. He doesn't even know how many buildings he's built, like, it's questionable.
Thank you for that comment. Gentlemen, at this time, I think there have been a lot of questions. We want to spend some time in deliberation, make a determination as to how you'd like to act.
Yeah, we'd like you to listen together.
All right.
List of conditional approvals.
Sure, so let's
That
begin
you're
by.
recommending, because you're more familiar with the ordinance than we are, what's in there.
Sure.
New ordinance.
Yep, no, absolutely. So to begin with, what we can do is we can simply refer to that new ordinance, which was brought up as number 2026-5-11. And obviously, I recommend that they comply with all of the terms of that ordinance if there was an approval, okay? They've also agreed to all of the terms that were outlined in this additional piece that was provided, and I believe have been recommended as a member of the public by Mr. Brown. So they've agreed to all of those as well, which is the fact that this is not a land development plan. They have agreed to that. They're going to do a Native American digs study, they agreed to that, traffic study, all of these were.
All of those, yeah, could we get a copy of that, and also, those are for the land development.
Sure. Actually, let me give you a copy right here.
Steve, Steve, there was a there's one in there that was buffer wall, I think.
Yeah, there is.
Excuse me, is there a copy of those ordinances that we're talking about
It's
for
not-
public?
That's not an ordinance, it was a document that was provided to the planning commission. The planning commission received two documents. One of them was a communication from Kristen Chapin that was read out by Mr. Lyman, or Chapin, my apologies for the mispronunciation. The other was a document that was also read by Mr. Lyman, which was, Mr. Brown's list of things he would like to see for the approval. Both of those were mentioned in public, both of those documents were outlined, and as I understand it, with regards to this document, which was Mr. Brown's read by Mr. Lyman, the developer had indicated they were amenable to all of those conditions during the course of their testimony.
Is there a copy of the ordinances that you mentioned that you had from last meeting that they're going to agree to? Is there copies of that for public?
The copies of the ordinance will
On
be
the website?
available to the public. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Attorney Brando, now that we're just seeing this for the first time.
When I was here, the ordinance that I saw, okay, that was.
That's not the ordinance.
No, I know, I'm talking about that setback waiver, that is in there, or will be. If we're agreeing with the ordinance as published, originally, had that setback waiver by the resident.
This isn't a let's make a deal moment, but what I will say is that my understanding of the ordinance is that it did have that waiver provision, and that it was incorrectly advertised with that not being.
I just want to make it clear that if these people are agreeing to the ordinance, whatever ordinance is, if that's in the ordinance, if that's what township or you believe the ordinance is, okay, if you can state that for the record, I'm fine. Okay, I just want to make sure that's there. That will be clear.
Okay, well, and again, we're here to make a recommendation. You can certainly say, provided that, the ordinance is the same as that, looking into that. I don't care how you want to do it. That's
Certainly, it's original presentation.
You can condition it. I would make a conditional statement.
So, so where it says buffer wall, sound absorbing wall on interstate, I don't think we're contemplating that. We're doing a buffer, a berm and trees, but if we have to do a sound absorbing wall, that's a.
Federal highway would have to approve that.
Yeah,
And
and
that's something that we don't, stop sign or for station.
I think when I was listening to whoever read it off, a lot of these are gonna be during the land development plan. That's a complete, above and beyond what we would normally do. The other thing too, is this backup generators on the west side of the building only? Because I think backup generators are shown on both sides of the building, so there's just not a ton of clarity in exactly every single one of these, but, in general, they feel good, except for the sound absorbing wall.
Well, let's not deal with feelings, because we had testimony that said yes, and we have the thing.
Well, this is the first we're seeing this.
I completely understand that. This is the first I'm seeing it today when I walked in here, but we've got to deal with it now. So let's go through them one by one. You agree that this is not a land development plan, right?
Yes.
And that's obvious.
And a lot of this will be during the land development.
Right, and we'll probably be handling a lot of this during the land development plan. But the archaeology study, that's like adding an extra step to the EIA, was already being requested, right?
Well,
The archaeology would be a requirement of the DEP permit for sewage planning. And so that would come during the land development stage.
Okay.
The whole concept before was, we're not doubling up on permit.
Well, listen, this is to allow the conditional use permit per the person who suggests as a member of the public, there's prior testimony that said yes. If you're gonna say no, that's fine. I just wanna make clear what the no is.
I was clarifying that as part of the land development plan, we'll do the archaeological study, but we're not agreeing to do all of these things as part of the conditional use approval.
So you would want that to
we
be.
agree to it as a condition of the conditional
Of the
use, that
conditional
would
use
be done.
permit when it's issued.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be done as part of the land development, but it can still be the condition of the conditional use.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I get it. Traffic study?
Yeah, we're doing that.
Yep.
We're doing that now.
Yep.
Aqua, yes.
Okay.
No drilling wells, yes. Bossa, hookup, yes. Setbacks, I don't even know why we need to restate this. This is in the other.
As long as everyone understands it's from the building, setback, and it applies to the building, not to the substation.
Disagree with that.
It's in the ordinance, which
It's in the ordinance.
was the statement, that you made before, okay. And I understand what you're saying. Ultimately, they'll make a decision on everything, I get it. And we move on from the setbacks to the buffer walls. This is where we start to see a real issue, right? The buffer walls.
We'll put buffer and screening and landscaping, but not actual walls.
So he said burning and treeing around the whole property.
All right. And the backup generators on the west side, you're looking to have generators on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Now, that is sort of a saldo situation, right? So I think that's a little bit different, but I get what you're saying. But what about the tests and the timing of the generator use?
Yeah, one at a time, I think that's fair. We'll agree to that.
Okay, all right. The stormwater retention ponds.
Yeah, that's fine.
That one's fine.
That's gonna be in the permitting already.
The max amount of water draw limits, you represented 20,000 gallons per day. What is it, divide by that?
Yeah, that's what Aqua's requiring.
Okay.
And we said we're okay with the $10,000.
Right, yep, okay, good. So now we went through the initial things that they would agree to. I would note that the primary difference they have with this is that they don't wanna do a buffer wall. They wanna do, buffering foliage, essentially, planting trees to act as a sound barrier. So, that being said, let's go through some additional things that were pointed out to me that can be used. You can decide what you wanna do, what you wanna recommend, okay? So this was brought under section 1101 of the Mifflin Township zoning ordinance for conditional uses. What we would do is we would recommend approval. If we recommend approval, subject to the following conditions and requirements, these are sort of the minimal ones that I would recommend. It has to be subject to section 1101, applicable provisions of article 4, 5, and 6 of the zoning ordinance, and the township's authority under the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, which, can include the approval of those terms of the new ordinance. The planning commission, let's see here, other things. Okay, we have to expressly condition the approval, and Attorney Schultzky mentioned this before, upon compliance with the conditional use application and plan set dated June 5th, 2026, except as modified by the conditions, okay? That's a standard language that I would recommend for the motion, if there's an approval. It will be limited to the data center uses described in the application and the testimony. Any expansion or material change in operational characteristics would require amended conditional use approval pursuant to section 1101. And by the time anything like that would come around, the new ordinance would be in effect. So, that would be directly applicable. The applicant shall not increase the scale or intensity of the use beyond that presented in the application, which they've already committed to by not enlarging it, including but not limited to electrical demand load, water usage, senior service demand, number or capacity of generators, building footprint, impervious coverage, or operational throughput. Okay? And we would ask that there be a submission for a detailed operational summary establishing maximum electrical load. I'm going to get into this in a bit. That's the megawatt capacity of the facility, maximum daily and annual water usage, number sizing, which they have already provided, but providing it in a writing at the time that we take it to public hearing. Maximum daily and water usage, number, size, and capacity of all generators and mechanical systems, the method and capacity of water and sewer service, and those characteristics would constitute the approved operational envelope of the use for the purposes of enforcing section 417J and section 401. So there's an existing ordinance provision that applies separately. It's there for those particular requirements. Those are some additional things now. That's not the bare minimum, some recommended things. Those metrics would then constitute the fixed operational limits of the approval, and the The applicant couldn't exceed such limits without obtaining an amended conditional use approval. And the applicant would provide prior to approval an explanation of the electricity load usage scope of the project, the manner in which that capacity would be met, which has been explained to us, which I anticipate would be in writing, and the manner in which the water or sewer service would be provided. We would also recommend, or I would also recommend that if there was going to be an approval, it would be in compliance with Articles 4, supplementary regulations, Articles 5, area and bulk, and Article 6, parking and loading, with the exception as may be amended by the recently enacted ordinance. And prior to the issuance of the certificates of occupancy, we recommend the applicant provide certification by a licensed professional that all improvements comply with the approved plans. That's what we call essentially an as-built plan approval, which will be more part of the process of the land development. So it's redundant, frankly. It can be provided as part of the same process with approval. The applicant would implement all traffic mitigation measures identified and submitted materials required by the Township of PennDOT, including but not limited to road improvements, which we discussed, turning lanes, traffic control devices, and construction traffic management. And they would prepare a traffic impact study. And if there is heavy vehicle use anticipated, there is a recommendation here that the township engineer document road conditions prior to construction following completion, consistent with section 428E of the existing ordinance. And any damage attributable to the use will be repaired by applicant. In essence, they've already committed to agreeing to do the traffic study and improve the road, so much of this is covered. Let's see here. Stormwater and site engineering. Applicant shall comply with all applicable stormwater management regulations and shall implement best management practices, control runoff, erosion, and water quality. All stormwater plans subject to review and approval by the township engineer. The applicant shall reimburse the township for all reasonable engineering review costs. We've already discussed that. Prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy, which again goes into Sal a little bit more, the applicant shall provide the certificate, the as-built essentially. All right. Noise limitations. We discussed 70 decibels between 7 and 8 p.m. and I think it's that was or was it 65? I'm trying to remember the exact ordinance decibels, but they're provided for in the ordinance. They're agreeing to abide by those. We could recommend those. We could also potentially go stricter as indicated there in that document, but that's ultimately up to your discretion. This is a recommendation or approval, so we can make that determination. The use would have to comply with the performance standards of section 417J, which includes certain limitations on noise, vibration, glare, heat, electrical disturbance, and emissions. Although frankly, I have that in there because I wasn't anticipating an agreement to every term, but we have an agreement to every term, which includes more express and I think more direct standards in our current ordinance. So if they're abiding by that, they're essentially abiding by this. There is a request here for an acoustic study. That's again probably something that would be done as a subject to a condition of the permit upon issuance. That would be performed during the saldo phase. The lighting control section that we have here is covered essentially if they agree by the new ordinance. And we can certainly set lighting controls under the existing ordinance. And we have visual screening. So there are actually visual screening requirements under the existing ordinance. There are buffer yard and screening requirements required in accordance with sections 505 and 506 and section 417F to minimize visual and operational impacts on adjacent uses. So you could add that as a condition. As part of the existing ordinance, it's a separate thing that applies generally to conditional use permits. Environmental and site impacts, they've already agreed to do an EIA, so we're set on that. The mitigation measures, also in the EIA. have to provide, if there is an approval, it must provide that there is adequate, it must prove essentially that there is adequate water, sewer, and stormwater facilities in accordance with section 417C and all applicable DEP requirements, so there's a section there of the ordinance for that. Documentation demonstrating availability and adequacy of service shall be submitted prior to zoning permit issuance. So I understand that the applicant might be thinking it to be after during the salvo process, but our ordinance does provide for this in a separate provision. So there does need to be some showing of what was discussed with Aqua, like what discussed with Basha, whether or not they're going to have capacity, at least a level of statement of capacity. And just going through.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Like, we already went through an ordinance process.
Yes.
You just listed 40 additional things that were already addressed
Yeah,
in
these
the ordinance,
are all-
and you're just like, oh, that's addressed, that's not, you can't put this in, I mean, like, honestly, like, I'm trying to take notes,
Right.
but I have no idea, like, what they're actually voting on, and it feels like, it feels like we already have, it feels like we had the ordinance before, that we all kind of agreed on how you're keeping.
So here's the situation. The planning commission ultimately gets to make an approval, okay, based on the application. They can set conditions of approval. The ordinance provides what those conditions are. And you're correct, we did the new ordinance, the new ordinance has certain provisions. My job is to educate them as to everything they can do. They can stop and say, you gotta abide by this ordinance plus these things that you've agreed to today. They could choose to do something different. I have to tell them though, what the ordinance in full provides, which includes not just the section that was the amendment. The amendment amended for that use.
Yeah, my concern is like, everything you just listed there is punitive towards us. There's no addition, like, there's a lot of stuff I would love to have, but none of that is included in what you just listed.
Again, all I can do is walk them through what is in the ordinance and let them make a determination as to what approvals they do or don't want. This is, by the way, all the things they could do for the approval based on the full list that was available, which is why it is a recommendation of here's everything you can do and is not a statement of this is what you must, right? And they get to make a decision as to what they do or don't do, and that will be up to them, not me. But I have to
After
educate
you make
them.
a decision on all of that you just read, okay, after what we just went through, okay, this doesn't make any sense now. I don't know what we were getting to. I mean, we came here and we said, we're gonna abide by the ordinance that these people, okay, the people here today, gave information for 3 nights. I think I was here almost midnight one night, okay, to come up with something. The applicant says what they came up with, okay, Kristen Chapin came up with, okay, and we're willing to agree to, okay, and then there was a list of a couple of other things that we could agree to. But how can you expect these people to agree to what you just went over?
And after I'm done listing all the things that could be conditioned, that approval could be conditioned on, you can make that exact point to them and say, we would request full respect, we would respectfully request that you approve the permit application on these conditions. Your solicitor, and that's fine, okay?
I just want to clarify, I'm going back to number 6. Where you say can't exceed the scope of use, and we agreed that building size should
Right.
be larger.
Yeah.
Then you said you can't increase the impervious coverage. Absolutely, at some point during the land zoning, that impervious coverage is gonna change. We know we need to be able to see the road. So, we don't think, this is a conditional use plan, essentially a sketch plan.
Well, no, but this is helpful because you just said that you are going to change the impervious use coverage because we know you're going to add growth. Now, that doesn't mean change it from what exists, because otherwise you never develop anything, right? But you mean you're going to change it from your plan, it's there, right?
Right, well, in accordance with what's allowed under the ordinance allows additional impervious coverage, so there may be tweaks to that, and it's gonna be fully designed at the time of the development.
What's the maximum amount of impervious coverage?
The ordinance has a maximum impervious.
Oh,
Doesn't have one now.
I think it's only buildings.
That's true, it has, but my point is, how much do you think you're going to end up covering?
We can get back to you on that. You just listed 50 things. I guess if you want to finish, that's fine, and we'll tell you what,
All right.
we're open to the previous approved ordinance and the 7 or 8 changes. 7 or 8 changes, except for the sound wall and.
Except for the sound wall.
And the other one, the east to west one, generators. I mean, I feel like this.
Listen, my job this time, and I had to fight the public on this a bit, now I'll fight you on it a bit. But my job at this time is to serve one group sitting here today at this table. And that means I have to provide a full list of every single thing that they could do, and they get to choose from the list, okay? And these are just their recommendations, the ultimate decision gets made by the Board of Supervisors. So, that being said,
Motion, please.
yeah, you know, good conversation.
You're around
All right.
15.
We also have something in here about emergency access. Apparently, there is a provision for plans for local emergency services already existing in our ordinance, found in section 428F, which provides that the applicant must provide site plans to local emergency service providers who shall cooperate in the development of an emergency response plan consistent with section 428F. Fire suppression, access, and hazardous material handling shall comply with applicable codes and industry standards as required under 417 and J9. I honestly don't think the applicant would have a problem with that. Is there a potential issue?
We haven't seen this, I mean, we need to see the ordinance right off the board.
Okay, all right.
Is that in the Saldo or the zoning?
No, that's in the zoning ordinance. And all of this is from the zoning ordinance. I didn't look at the
So
Saldo.
a lot of this stuff's repetitive. with our zoning, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is our zoning providing a bunch of different provisions that you can go down. You can choose to just say, look, we'll agree if you agree to abide by the ordinance in this, we would recommend approval on that. You could say, no, we're gonna recommend approval and you have to do this. I wanted you to have the full picture. That's my job. So that's what you're getting, is the full picture. And honestly, there is a remediation provision that's covered in the new ordinance, so it's better covered in the new ordinance. So, and there is that's essentially it. The general enforcement portion, you don't have to worry about. That was for your information as to how it can be enforced. But basically, there would be an approval subject to the possibility of inspection. That's it. Okay. That is everything.
Attorney Brando?
Yes.
You in as to confer? Or should we wait till?
If you're asking for a recess, I guess that would be up to the planning commission to move if they want to have a recess. You could also, if you want to deliberate, since it is a matter of potential litigation, if you have legal questions for me, you can certainly ask them in an executive session. You just have to move forward and go out of it. I would also require recess, or you can stay on the record. All of these are your choices.
We'd like to look at what you read from, if you could, when we confirm.
Well, and I had that conversation now at the beginning, when I mentioned that I did not want to provide legal statements of legal opinion to people outside of the group, right? So that was my rationale. So no, but I could provide you with the ordinance in a rundown. In any event, that's the entire rundown of everything that I had there. A lot of it was covered by the new ordinance. A huge portion of it was covered by the ordinance. There are some additional things there that are in the zoning ordinance that you can addition on, and that's entirely up to you. And and remember, this is your recommendation for approval or denial, whatever you want to do. So that's just the entire list of things. So you can That's the existing ordinance. It doesn't time on the application.
recess, no, you're on?
Maybe less. All right, we have to make some sense out of it.
Okay.
You want to-
Some of it.
While we do a motion, do an executive session really quickly, we'll come back on, we'll announce the executive session. All right, we're going to have minutes here taken by our court reporter, which will be great. We'll have the opportunity to talk about this and.
Let's do it, sunshine law, exception for this.
Only any legal questions they have as far as where it's in the ordinance, what the impact is, that type of thing, that's essentially my answer.
I mean, just as a parting thing, like, we're agreeable to the ordinance, we're agreeable to those things that we talked about, and like you said, there are a bunch of things that are already included in the land development plan. So like, the intent before was that we're not gonna like double up on a bunch of things we have to do later on anyway, and so, like, it feels like we should go with the ordinance that was passed, the new ordinance, not the old ordinance, we're stipulating on everything, and then those 7 or 8 things that Ricky put forward, that we talked through, that work and don't work, like not the sound wall, and not the generator on only one side. But other than that, like, that's more, it's a bigger win for whoever gave me that list.
Correct.
Okay, so the list I will point out, and I did not read the full thing because it was as part of advisement, was generated by me, scouring that ordinance because it was under the existing ordinance. And we didn't know if you were going to come in here and talk about the enacted ordinance, so I had to look at everything. That's now why I have to advise them on everything, because it's my obligation. But I appreciate the position you've taken, I'm sure the board has taken it as well. Let's just do this, because we don't wanna have someone making an argument about the Sunshine Act or anything else. Let's just do a recess for 10 minutes and let them talk. And everyone else can still have a breath of fresh air. Think about something other than the data center. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Motion approved.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll go out after you. Okay. I was on Facebook. I'll have a funny too later.
Okay, will it be on Mifflin though?
Yeah, I'll put it on there for you. Yep, I got it. How are you? It's almost, they're getting to wrapping it
Oh, that sounds pretty good. We're both sweating. How's it going?
It wasn't like.
I look at it, I should say 56, 7% of people that buy it. Best place for a hook in town. That's how I look at it. Hopefully they'll call for hooks.
Well, send us we're watching that. Tell them what's going on. This is what he says, God. Chief Bill will be hired on 12/4. Everything is.